Welcome to today's Skill Up. My name is Emily Springer, and I am thrilled to be able to have Dr. Stone Meredith joining us today, a faculty at NU. And we're going to be covering some strategies that you might be able to use for writing. If you joined us last week, you saw Dr. Irma Diaz-Martin present, and she provided some strategies centered around an acronym called IDEA. I will provide a link to that recording in our follow-up, just so you have access to it along with this one. And if you haven't already, and you just joined our room, we do encourage you to grab one of your academic paragraphs to use as Dr. Meredith moves through today's presentation. Again, this is not required, but encouraged. And with that being said, Dr. Meredith, I have covered all of our Zoom norms for the day, and I am excited to introduce you to all of our staff, faculty, and students on the call and let you dive into today's session.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you everybody for coming and for seeing. My hair's grown out a little bit since we took that picture, but that is me. I'm Dr. Stone Meredith. So many times a week, y'all, people say, "Are you sure that's right?" They think it's Meredith Stone. I'm sure it's right. And Stone is a family name, and I'm sitting on top of Cedar Mountain, North Carolina, where that family first gathered in the early 1800s. And so, really exciting that it worked out for me and my family to be up on our little mountain and to share this information with you that has really impacted generations of our family. Because here's the story. I was old before I went to Western Carolina University in Colby, North Carolina, and learned the meal plan. And I've been a writer since I was in sixth grade. I worked at a local radio station called WPNF, Wonderful Pisgah National Forest. We called it We Play No Funk back in the 80s. I'm a Generation Xer, and they wouldn't let me play Michael Jackson. But somebody should have taught me this, y'all. And I did not learn it until I was in my graduate program and I had been a journalist. And this wonderful rhetorician, Marsha Lee Holmes, who founded Rhetoricians for Peace at Western Carolina University, said to me, "Stone, honey, these are great ideas, but they're not in academic format. And we're really having a hard time measuring your critical thinking. Can you just try to do this?" Well, yes, I can. And so she really taught me how to make it my own. And I want to do that for y'all today. So I'm going to talk a lot. And I do speak Southernese, so there'll be a few R's and G's missing when I'm talking to y'all. But I really want you to know that you're going to leave with these and you're going to be able to get them on the YouTube channel as well. And she's going to send you this information with the link to this recording and to how to find it on our YouTube channel. So don't worry, they're real text heavy because I'm anticipating you going back into them and to also using our Academic Success Center. So in our Academic Success Center, if you go to the paragraph piece, you'll see they've given you like a template and little spaces you can fill in. The idea is not to follow the template, but to take that template after you've listened to me talk and start to kind of try to create a database wherever you are to make it your own. Okay, here we go. So if you've heard of the meal plan, we can talk about that. We can do whatever you need to do. But the meal plan comes from a lot of places. People credit it with being from Duke University, and I'm here to tell you they didn't come up with it because the young lady who put it in their writing lab worked for me at North Central and at Capella. So I know that we were using it before Duke University had it up. And I bring that point out to say the meal plan got real traction in the late 90s, early 2000s in online education, particularly in graduate programs. So I want to point that out. You'll go out and you'll look around online. You can find online versions in a lot of places. So as we get started, as a Tar Heel, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has a real traditional version of it. Duke University has kind of a real wordy, sort of intellectica version, as you might expect them to have. Colorado State Global has kind of a writing studio, so it's kind of a vibey version of it. And then I think National has a real good, like, meat and potatoes version where they tell you what it is and then they give you samples to model it, because that's kind of our pedagogy, right? So know that if you don't like a meal plan or how I talk about it, you can Google academic paragraph meal plan and pull it up. If you just type in meal plan, people are going to try to sell you lunch at the cafeteria. So make sure you put academic paragraph plan in front of meal plan unless you're looking to buy lunch at the University of Kansas. Okay. All right. So we're going to define it. We're going to apply it. We're going to do next steps. And then, of course, teacher that I am here, I'm going to leave you with some resources. And we're ready for the next one. So the light blue, the turquoise might be a little hard to see, but it's just to make it pop out. You'll see the main idea, and it really depends on when and where you went to school. In American education, there are, yeah, Walden, that's another you see in the chat. Walden's another one. People like Dr. Claudia Santine took that meal plan over there and did wonderful things with it. So you may have heard topic sentence. I know in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the idea of a topic sentence was real prevalent in writing center work. So you've either heard it called a main idea or a topic sentence, but that's really what it is. You're telling the reader in your own words what the paragraph is about. You're backing it up, and then you're taking that extra step, almost like Jack McCoy on Law and Order, to tell the reader or in your terms why that connection matters. So you're going to introduce the idea, back it up with evidence, and then that analysis piece is really where that critical thinking work goes. Okay. The link is an interesting piece because APA doesn't love it. Uh-oh. And so it's not meant to, if you're an MLA writer, like if you major in literature, or if you major in something that's still citing in the humanities, which is pretty much just literature anymore, they're going to teach you to make that like real pretty, and where somebody's going to want to just go on to the next idea because it was so pretty. APA is not a fan, right? APA wants you to be able to scan. That's why we have the dates in where MLA doesn't. Smith 2025 noted. Okay, so I see that we're talking about some pretty current research, and I'm looking for current research. I see Smith 2025. Maybe on another day, you're looking for research that's not real current. It says Smith 1975. Perfect. I'm looking for old research. I'll pick this article. So APA, which is the discipline specific citation style that you're going to use, sees the meal plan in kind of a different way. So if you have seen something like this, maybe you learned it in high school from an English teacher who did it in MLA, Modern Language Association, which is the English style. I want to point out some different things up front right as we get looking at it. APA is American Psychological Association, and really it is the academic citation style of national, certainly North Central, and all of the disciplines of with the exception of the MA in English, all of our disciplines that we grant education and graduate education in is going to follow that. ASA is another one in sociology. You may have the IEEE if you're an engineer. And all of those non-humanities citation styles kind of think in this way. This is important as you get into your meal plan. You are the writer. Today is Monday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. But you hear that present tense verb? So when you speak, you use the present tense. And when the cited evidence speaks, it's the past tense for a lot of reasons. For one thing, that's in the past, and you are the new knowledge. So as we get started, you see the main idea and the analysis are your voice in your disciplines, including sociology with very few exceptions, including how they cite in the medical field, including how they cite in the legal field, and all those other citation methods, and even the style sheets that your journals will use. They're not going to want you to use I. I think this is fun becomes this party is fun because. So the minute you remove that I, you forced yourself deeper into the content. But in APA and all these citation styles, they know we all want to say I, especially when we're spending our life working on it. And so they have played with the rhetoric where you don't have to do that. You are present tense. Sources are past tense. So then when a reader comes in and for the purposes of today scans in APA, if it's present tense, it's the writer. If it's past tense with the year and page or paragraph numbers, it's the source. So you see how this all kind of fits together where you're speaking in English and then you kind of layered this extra language over it. And the meal plan is kind of the platform on which that can all really work together and make it easy to decode. So if you've ever learned to march, or if you ever learned to cheer, or if you've ever learned to play a sport like tennis where you have to repeat the same thing over and over to get the same shot, this is that. This is the academic cadence where you create new knowledge for the field. So right now, you need to learn how to do the meal plan because you're one of those people that it's hard to explain to friends and neighbors where you just got to get this degree. And maybe somebody's going to pay you more, or maybe you're going to get a better job, but you've been in this graduate work long enough to know either you want this or you don't. And there's just something inside people getting a graduate education where they've just got to get it. And sometimes it's hard to explain why. So you have that personality. And right now, you get, everything, you've got a hammer and everything's the nail of that graduate work. And so you're very eager to talk about it. But I want you, as we learn this meal plan, to think about your audience. You've got a very artificial audience in coursework. You've got your peers and you've got a teacher. But at National, I think we do a very great job of making you realize who that larger audience is. The Academy needs you to create new knowledge. If I publish something in 2025, or Emily does, and nobody talks about it in 2026, that idea stops. So while you're in school and you've got to get this degree, at some point you're going to write your thesis, your dissertation, whatever project you're working on, and you will be a scholar in the field. And so your whole graduate education is learning how to be that voice on this meal plan that will make you ready to add to the knowledge pool. So as you're worrying, is mine as good a post as good as Susie's? Can I get this done? Can I possibly miss another soccer match? And all those things that go through your life as you're doing this thing that just matters to you, that is hard to explain. I really encourage you today and the rest of your career to think, I know what I need from it, but I need to remember who I am in the larger knowledge pool of my field. My field needs me to keep my field alive and moving forward. And that's why we all cite the same way, write the same way. I don't know if y'all know this, but everybody knows who Plato is, right? He's not just, the guy we saw in cartoons in the allegory of the cave when we were little, but he's a very significant, not to toot my own horn, but he and I kind of had the same job. He is about 2,500 years ago, right? And so he's a big deal. Of course, everybody knows about Plato, and yet we would not know about much of his work if he had not taught his students to write and cite when they were at his academy the way that you're learning, because people wanted to make money. Some of his texts went into modern day Turkey. Some of his texts went into modern day Spain with the help of people in Rome like Quintilian. But his students were taught on this day when it rained and Joe Blow was up for murder and so was a senator in this district, Plato said this in the garden. I mean, it's obviously a paraphrase, right? But over time, we don't have Plato's citation method, but we do have the notes from his students. And so in the 1900s, we were able to validate a lot of his texts because they all wrote on a similar paragraph plan and they all cited in a similar way. So empires come and go, nation states come and go. If you've been in academia long at all, you realize that publication manuals come and go. But 2,000 years from now, someone will be able to pick up your text and pull up the current edition of APA and track down what you're saying and validate what you're writing. And putting it on the meal plan sure going to make that a whole lot easier. So have I convinced you to buy in? We're going to look at one point and move on. For the paper, the analysis and main idea, it's that point under analysis, connect back to the larger thesis or problem statement for the paper. That's real important to keep in mind. So we're getting ready to look at another slide and we'll go on to it, Emily, now. Where we talk about a little bit, I've led you up to it a little bit. We're going to think about some other audiences. Has anybody ever seen a rubric? That's an audience too. And I think faculty who tell you it isn't an audience are losing a chance to teach. That rubric's in there for a reason. We know where you need to be to get those outcomes. And that rubric tells you in English where you need to be. And all that rubric is doing is measuring your ability to think critically or use APA and spell good. Okay, so usually the top 3 to 4 categories of your rubric are going to measure your ability to execute critical thinking. Okay, you know what Bloom's taxonomy is, the steps of learning. At the top of that, and there are multiple versions, if you're interested, you can just Google Bloom's taxonomy and get loads of pictures. And you see how you climb the ladder, you want to summarize, and then by the time you get to the top where all of you are, you want to be able to evaluate. And that meal plan is a snapshot on each of your main ideas of your critical thinking process, and I'll tell you why. You have to come up with a main idea and or a piece of evidence you care about. We're going to get to that in a minute. And you have to build new knowledge about what somebody who's already published has said. Remember, that's how the field keeps growing. I stay alive when you cite me, and Emily stays alive when you cite her. Mark stays alive. You see how it works. And then maybe Mark comes back and answers me again when I've cited from him. And that's how it works. And those rubrics are teaching you to do that. And they really measure. The first few categories will be on what's called a global concern. And that's that critical thinking piece where you have gotten a task, you have evaluated articles in the field, minded, and made new knowledge. Long-term use of the tool is going to translate into your ability to read an APA or whatever the case may be better. And so you see how it plays off each other. If I read in the meal plan, if I write in the meal plan, if I talk to my peers in the meal plan, if I reply to discussion posting replies in the meal plan, then it just becomes the same way you learn a forehand in tennis. Every time I pick up that racket, I'm left-handed. Can you tell? Because I'm just swinging that forehand all day. Every time I pick up that racket, I'm going to do that same thing over and over again. And after doing it for 40 something years, I don't even think about a forehand. That's what happens with reading, writing, thinking, talking in the meal plan. And this is the piece I want you to customize. This is where you're going to be Tom Ford at Gucci. We're going to reinvent everything, okay? This is where you make it your own. I am a color person. I have some dyslexia, don't love technology. I like paper and pens. And in my garage and in my closet, I have got a bunch of these little books right here that you can get at Jenny Beck. Shout out to Jenny Beck, or you can get online, or you can get from Amazon or whoever your buddy is. And you'll see inside these are plain. There's no writing. It has a little thing on it. I'm a little old lady, Gen Xer, and I like to do mine in here. And only at certain points do I take my meal plan database to online repositories, and I have those sons of guns backed up. It's taken me since 2004 to tell you that. This is your first day. So maybe you're a big technology person and you like to do everything virtually and the thought of paper is just a horror. Well, today is to consider maybe I should look back at the paper and pencil. We're going to get that to that in a minute. But if you use the meal plan, if you use it for your reading, if you use it for your discussion postings, if you use it for your papers, if you use it for your conversations with your committees, then it just becomes how you do business. I find that students tell me again and again, I've started using it in my workplace. This is undergrad and graduate now. I've started using it in my workplace. It's so great. When I find a quote I want to use, I throw it to the side, and when I have time, I get back and do it. So it really bleeds a lot of places, but you got to open your hearts and minds, say, I've got to make this my own. And here's a girl who's told me she, for 21 years, she's still perfecting it. Okay? All right, we're ready to go. Look at all those things. Now I'm going to tell y'all, my former students helped me come up with this list. I had 3. And they said, oh, wait, you got to tell them this. Oh, wait, you got to tell them that. And so because my sweet little boy, who's also a graduate student, is great at parallelism because I just beat it into his head, you'll notice that these are parallel. And by parallel, I mean they start with the same part of speech. So thinking, thinking, archiving, archiving, to organize, to generate, to transfer. So let's look at that a little bit. Thinking in the meal plan makes it easier to read. Thinking in the meal plan helps us write. We're starting to hear that connection just by being kind enough to listen to me, aren't we? Archiving your coursework. What is an archive? So if y'all have a pen and paper, write down this guy's name because he's so crazy good. He's dead, Lord love him, and he died working at a school in California. His name is Jacques, Jacques Derrida. I'm going to see if I can type it in here. And he was a big guy in my field. He came over from France, and sometimes they come over and see things we can't. But he writes this article called Archive Fever, and it can be a little dense to read, but it's really a fascinating notion that once you touch something, you've added to it and it's changed forever. You know that idea of throwing a pebble over in Thailand and it's going to reach me in Cedar Mountain, or a butterfly wing? It's kind of the same thing, but with rhetoric, right? So when you create an archive, humor me. You go into your first course and they say, read Susie Smith's article on X. It's really the key of our field in the 80s. Okay. So you read Susie Smith's article in your first class and you're like, wow, Susie's right. Look where we are now. And then you get to the end of your coursework and they're like, well, where have we come since Susie? Well, you're look at the big brain on you by that point, right? And so you go back in and say, I remember Susie and I see we've done blah, blah, blah. And then you go into your dissertation and you're like, I ought to start with Susie. She was kind of a big deal. Let me talk about her again. That's great. And you did a great job. But I'm here to tell you right now, the better job is to archive the notes you made the first time you read Susie. Pick up your notes in that later class from the first time you read Susie. Read through what you highlighted and mattered, and it will blow your mind how much we have taught you at National University. But it will also say, here's where I was before, here's where I've come now. I'm going to make notes on where I am now. And then when you go to that dissertation where you're the only expert, you're the person making up the idea, imagine the power of seeing yourself read that anchor article 3 times at 3 different points in your learning career and at 3 different perspectives. Imagine the authority and the expert you are from your corner of the knowledge pool on Susie's anchor article. That's the power of archiving the coursework and the dissertation. Archiving your notes on an academic article over time, it shows your history. And this really, really matters. If you think about chapter 2 of a dissertation, why do we have y'all write that? Because we want to see you suffer? Sort of. But the bigger reason is because we need to know where you stand in the field. I know what I think about Jacques Derrida. I'm just a fool for him, y'all. When I went to France, I went to his little statue and took my picture. I am a fool for him. My husband, who's also on this call and told me to break a leg, can't stand him. He didn't even go over there with me. He thinks he's full of it. Okay. So when he picks up my lit review, he really needs to know how I'm talking about and thinking about other scholars because he's on a different side of the field. So the more I can do to keep track of how I grow and what I'm reading, the more authority I speak with when I write and cite, and the more likely I am able, let's say that Emily and I disagree, the more likely I am. So I appreciate why you said that. And when I was reading this one time for this, I saw it too. But have you considered that? And those are the scholars who change the field. And those are the scholars who don't feel guilty about missing soccer games because they know they're giving it their all. But I'm going to throw in another little point. It's faster. I know it sounds crazy, but if you will find a system, whether it's like my little book or it's on your little phone that I finally had to break down and buy myself a big grandma phone, or whatever the case may be, somewhere in between is where most of you will land, right? Some kind of a database. If you will just dump it in, dump it in, dump it in, dump it in as you go, you cannot believe the time it saves and how quickly your recall comes because you know. And what you'll start learning is, oh, I remember I put that into this database. Oh, I remember I put that into that database. And it frees up your buckets, as linguists call them. Linguists tell us we only have so many buckets. And y'all are at the top of the bucket game. The more fluent you are in a language and in a subject, the more each bucket can hold, but we've only got so many buckets. So if you're trying to hold on this and oh gosh, 3 courses ago and then you're just overwhelmed. But if you know you've got a database and you put it over here, then you've got that out of the bucket and you can focus more on what's at hand. And then when you go back in and say, okay, I'm trying to remember about Susie, all my buckets are empty. Here's all my notes. Think of the brain power you save. And so again, to look at that last point, to transfer key evaluation from your past to your new. You wouldn't be here if you weren't bright. You wouldn't be here if you couldn't do it. And yet, imposter syndrome is the sickness we all get. I've been out since 2004 and I've got it. Why did I make all my friends read this presentation? I've been teaching it longer than some of y'all have been alive because that's what happens. The best always feel that way, right? The most committed feel that way, and that's how they keep winning. And so this gets rid of a lot of that anxiety because you're not like, I thought I did pretty great on that. No, I know for a fact I did because here's what I highlighted and here's what I wrote back. Okay. All right. We're ready for the next one. Okay. There's a lot of words there, and I'm going to let y'all read them if you want to. But what I am going to tell you is there's no one way to do the meal plan. And I grew up in the 80s and everybody was going to win and get on Wall Street and whatever. I mean, obviously not me in the English department, but it was go, 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 faster, faster, faster. And it was a time when you went to college, you took placement tests to clep out instead of coming in prepared for high school. Just run as fast as you can. And so I was trained in my undergraduate to get the topic, grab 3 quotes, and make a paper. Maybe not great, but we still love UNC. Over time and through the 80s and 90s, and particularly in the late 90s, early 2000s, rhetoric and composition and curriculum theorists have really teased out why that prescriptive method has cost us a lot of knowledge we could have learned. And over time, we've dipped back into the 20s, 30s, and 40s and some of that post-World War II work we did when the GI Bill was bringing new people into the higher education population. And we have returned kind of more to our form, as Plato would say, where we really realize that the best thing to do is to give students a prompt, tell them how long it has to be and how many sources, and just shut up. Because sometimes you have the great quote and it jumps out at you on the first 2 pages. And sometimes you have the great idea and you say, I'm going to read this and show them why the teacher was wrong. And I cannot tell you enough how important it is to stick to those guns. And I'll give you an example. Okay. I don't know if you have watched The White Lotus, if you've ever watched any of them. It's a little racy, it's a little controversial, but this third one really reminded me of some work I did on my master's in early American literature about this novel where this guy, Wieland, he kills his family. And he's just tortured over it, and we learn about it. And then what do we see? A guy from Duke, of course, because he didn't go to UNC like me. We see him toying with that same idea. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to go talk about this somewhere, that same American debate between faith and reason is still out there. So I was in a situation where I jotted down about 8 main ideas and I went back into the book and the novel. And you see how quickly that evidence came together because I knew what I was looking for. So that's not really dangerous, right? But you know what I found about halfway through? I had to go back and change what I thought because when I really went back in and started looking at the cited evidence, I had missed a lot of stuff and I had forgotten a lot of stuff about that novel. And so, because I'm not married to the idea of, well, too bad, I done got my main idea in place, because I'm not stuck to that, I've ended up with something I think is going to be a pretty significant piece that I'm going to use at a conference in June. So, that's the real life application of it, okay? This pro tip, real quick, and then we'll move on. Imagine the power of revisiting both over the years. You'll have a credible and well-cited journey of your graduate program, and you can resume a database when you want to. And do you know how I caught the mistake I made? I looked at something I wrote in 2010, and I went, oh my gosh, that's right. This is where it all changed. I would have lost that. It was in a blue book, thank goodness, that I just happened to find because I had the year on it, not in the pink one like we're doing in this decade. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Now let's get a visual of this. So cars are important to the American economy, or you found this statistic or this information that you wanted to use. And you see here, I'm not like a slave to APA. I put in the page number because you want that. That's just rude, in my opinion, not to put it in. You write to your reader, whether it's a quote or a paraphrase. I always want them to go right where I found it because I want them to follow my logic. And you see, I put the link in there. So now I've got everything I need to go back and do my reference page. Maybe you're a big APA person. You want to put the full reference in. That's up to you. But one is starting with a main idea, and one is starting with a piece of evidence. Now, Emily, if you'll blip over to the next one. Let's look at a real example of what happened and how you can end up. Look at that main idea. Cars are important to the automotive industry, and the impact can be in many ways, including numbers, blah blah blah. Cited evidence, analysis. Let's pop down there. The data shows that 1 in 10 Americans are employed by the industry, and this data only reports by those employed by the industry. This gets to a piece that everybody blows off on the meal plan because, as I told you, APA doesn't like it. So one thing APA really does allow you to do is focus on those first three pieces. But here's why you like the link, and here's why the link is the last thing I revise when I'm revising. Do you know that idea of something begs the question? I say something, this data only reports on those employed in the country. So it begs the question, well, then what other data is out there? That's how APA likes to see a link used. The impact can be traced even more by examining the impact of auto sales have on the American economy. What do you think that next paragraph is going to be about? So this is why that link piece I want to stress to y'all today, especially at your level. If you're in ninth grade, whatever, get the MIA going and we're good. But at your level, where you're really shaping knowledge, you're really saying, I want to track this over years. I want to take this into praxis and theory. I want to do workplace, and I want this to be who I am in my field. You may move these paragraphs around 7 or 8 times in a section. You may move that section around 7 or 8 times in a chapter or in a paper. You may share something in a discussion posting that has a very specific little focus looking at me like this, and then it may become the problem statement. So you're going to do all kinds of things with either that main idea or that cited evidence, and the link and the analysis can and should fluctuate with where you take these ideas. Is it cheating to say, oh, sure, hang on, Derrida. There we go. Is it cheating to say I had one main idea and one piece of evidence and I'm going to use it in several places? No, it is the heart of scholarship. Once you find something that happens, and the muse doesn't always come, let's be honest. Sometimes it's Thursday at 2 o'clock and you're like, oh man, I got how many hours to get this thing in? Blip, blip, blip. 3 quotes. I'm going to build my meal plan. This will get me going, right? And then somebody in your class will come in and spark an idea, or the teacher will, and you'll move on. Every piece of cited evidence doesn't have to be the hill you die on, every main idea. And that's another point that's really great about this. Every day you're not at your best, every day you're not at your worst, but this factors in for the idea that this is going to stay with you and you're going to make this tool your own. You're going to archive in your own way so that if you find a good connection that you use in a discussion post, it can be great in a paper, it can be great at a presentation at work, it can be something that you pull in to flesh out your dissertation. I've got stuff that didn't make it to my dissertation that I finished in 2004 that I still pull in papers, particularly on Ernest Hemingway, because I can. And this gets to a really key point. If you have an idea, I know y'all are busy. I mean, I've been at it for a long time and I'm still busy. Once you get into this world, you're never going to have free time because your brain just doesn't work that way anymore. And so, why lose an idea because you don't have a database? Well, because you don't have a database. So, you have all these good ideas, you write down on a piece of paper, and then somebody cleans the house. This gets rid of that. When I think of the ideas I lost when I worked in journalism, when I was an undergraduate, it's so frustrating. When I think of the ideas I've helped people save by teaching this for 25 years, I feel better. So the idea of this is whether you come up with a main idea first, the cited evidence, it really doesn't matter. You're making this your own process and you're making this your own system. And maybe some of you want to publish in academia forever, and maybe some of you want to do PowerPoints and be project managers. We'll all do something in between. But again, as we look at this, what happened to that main idea once it all came together? What happened once it all came together? The main idea got longer. The link made sense because I've decided that the next place I'm going to go in this paper is to talk about sales. Now, if I want to talk about employee rights, the link's just going to change. Do you see how easy once you're like, these all have component parts? Because I'll tell you something, the more fluent a writer is, the less likely they are to move their paragraphs around. Why that is, I don't know, but it's true. And I'll tell you this, once students get their APA, their grammar usage and mechanics, the bottom part of the rubric perspective in place, there is a less than 5% chance the average writer will feel comfortable in moving the global stuff, less than 5%. And the higher the degree, the more the chance diminishes unless they have tools they work with regularly. That's research I've done since 1999. And it never changes, especially with graduate students. If anything, it's gotten higher with more technology. I will tell you that a semester or two of the meal plan, and we see a complete flip in the policy, because why would you not move it around? Right? I'm not going, you want to, hey, y'all, let's go put on roller skates and just see what happens. If you know how to roller skate and they're your size, it's a great idea. But if you don't, I'm good. I want my ACL. Thank you. So now what's happening? We're getting a tool, right? We have a tool. So there's no reason not to revise. There's no reason not to dump all the quotes in a database. There's no reason not to dump all the main ideas in a database. There's no reason not to merge them. Get them into a paper format and feel comfortable moving them up and down. Correct? All right, next slide. This is a really important factor, and this is where you become Tom Ford instead of a member of the Gucci family and make the brand your own. Okay, so for the colors, to be honest with you, I just tried to make ones I thought everybody could probably see okay. It doesn't matter what colors you use, but I'll show you right here. Everywhere I go in my book bag, every place I go, I have these pens. Some are from the dollar store, some are from fancy shops. I also have a lot of different kinds of pencils. So, for example, these two pencils have very different lines and colors on the paper because I use them for different things, right? Real common in journalism, old school journalism, not so common anymore. But you see, here's a disposable pen with like old timey, right? With the little nib. I use that for certain things, right? Because you have to really work pretty hard to get that pen to work. And so I use that for certain things. But I show you this. This is a felt tip. This is a fine line felt tip. All these things mean different things, and only me and my son can read it because he's been forced to sit in the car with me all these years. But do you see how specialized and how I replicate this? Because I'm not playing. I've got my system down, I've got stuff to do, and this is how I get through it quickly and keep reading. This is how specialized my meal plan and my color coding has become. So you'll notice here the main idea is in kind of that purpley blue. Then the cited evidence, the analysis I put in red because again, that's the new knowledge piece. That's really where the APA reader who is scanning your teachers, your audience, your dissertation committee, that's where they're going to go. And then if that analysis makes sense, they're going to read back up and say, does it track with your main idea? Because they already know all the stuff you're going to cite. They've been doing it forever. And then that link I put as needed because you don't always need it. But that's where it leads to the next paragraph. So I want to tell you something that's a little bit of a bugaboo. Once people get going on this, they get down to the analysis part and they're like, oh my gosh, this is new knowledge. I did it. My main idea in my analysis, and I just want to talk about it. And oh my gosh. And sometimes I see 15, 16 sentences. One little boy, my little boy, he's probably 45, turned in a paper the other day and he had a page and a half of analysis. But that's okay because that is a normal thing. That's why it's over there by itself on the little sticky note. A common move when you first start doing this meal plan is you just tell me everything that ever happened to you in that analysis section because you're excited that you see the new knowledge. And that's where this color coding piece is the most important and the most salient. Because if you're ever going to dump more than one main idea in a paragraph, it's going to be in that analysis link place. We just get excited. And so I really encourage you as you start using this tool, if you see long analysis, say, wait a minute, Meredith Stone or Stone Meredith, whatever her name was, she told me this is the problem. I've got to go in there and make sure this isn't a new main idea. And how are you going to do that? You're going to look at your main idea and then you're going to look at your analysis. And once you get off that, boom, I've got a new paragraph. And you know how much it costs to hit enter? Nothing. I always say new paragraph's free, guys. Let's break it apart. And what do you do with that extra information that crept into the analysis? You have your main idea. So then you go out and find your cited evidence. That's just one of those that worked out that way, right? I will say this. When you make your color scheme, kind of commit to it. Play around with it for a little while. Go down to I really recommend, I guess it's the $1.25 store, Dollar General, or whatever you have. They have great school stuff. And so I really recommend starting there real low stakes, so spend $5 and get you 3 or 4 different kinds. I will tell you that students tell me ballpoint, felt, pencils, textures matter, and the color coding pencils are great for shading. All right, let's look at the pro tip. You see, I pointed that out, right? Watch, beware the Ides of March in the analysis section. So, what are we learning? We want one main idea per paragraph. Extra stuff often creeps in the analysis section. So, if it does, we're just going to use that free enter key. We're going to jerk it over here and say, here's a new meal plan paragraph where I have the main idea first. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to build it out. Okay, next slide. I want to pause here for a minute and let y'all take notes because if any of you do have a paragraph plan in front of you and a way to just mark it, even if you just got an old blue pen or an old pencil or something, and just maybe take a moment if you want to ask a question or if you want to take a look at it, or if you just want to take a break because, honey, I'm a talker. I'm sure y'all have ciphered that by now. It's totally fine. But I have just really dumped probably what would have been the first 2 semesters that Plato went over every day. If we moved up to ancient Rome, Cicero, who was a Roman, and Quintilian, who was a Spaniard, they probably would have done this the first couple of years they had you. And I can tell you that if you ever work with me on a dissertation, I'm going to hit it every day. If you're in my undergrad, I'm going to hit it every day. So you're getting something in 45 minutes that people spend their entire career on. My husband, James Meredith, who also teaches at National, has been doing this longer than I have, and he's been doing this plan for at least 35 years. I've been doing it for over 20, and I still am changing.
And I'm going to pause there just for a second because I want to make sure we were able to there were a few things that came in the chat. And then just for those who do want to take a moment to take a look at one of their own academic paragraphs in case you had a chance to pull that up when we started. So you can take a look at some of the things Dr. Meredith has mentioned throughout. And maybe you don't have your colored pens right now to mark up that paragraph, but maybe you could do like little tiny symbols or just jot down really quick right next to it just to say, hey, does this actually need to go to the next paragraph? You can maybe make a little note to yourself. Someone had mentioned while our participants are able to do that, Dr. Meredith, someone had mentioned they really enjoyed how you present these concepts. They mentioned their age and that this has been really interesting no matter the age.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And I want to know that I put in the Jacques Derrida and that article's called Archive Fever. I mean, it's not a fun read, but I think getting that concept of what it means to have the residue, like all our residue is on each other now because we've been here and we've shared and we've gone into that knowledge pool together. And so it's translated from French, which I have to read the translation despite Miss Hooper's best attempts in French class. So but so know that it's translated from French. So a little bit on that, but it really does get that idea of why every time you touch something, your residue is part of the archive, and why you're not just somebody missing out on stuff and going to school because you're just one of those people who has to. You're actually adding and contributing to the knowledge pool, and I want you to remember this. You are contributing to the way National University teaches by the way you respond to what we share. We revise courses, we listen. And so you're already part of the knowledge pool. It's not like one day I'm going to publish or one day I'm going to do a dissertation. You're a part of it today when you engage with scholars like me who've been at it for a long time. I'm looking for your feedback to see where to go next, to archive and keep the archive fever going. So I was really glad somebody asked for that article and how this is applied differently online digital resources. For me, it's not different. And I'll tell you why. I came from journalism and I came from radio and TV. And so that idea of I'm talking, I'm reading what somebody hand wrote, or where somebody had printed me a script, or where then I was there for when we went on the screen and was I reading it on paper and script. For me, it's never really been an issue. And so I think maybe that's why I don't acknowledge it or teach it that way. I can tell you, should I go from online digital books, periodical, whatever works for you? I like to hold a book and smell it. I still get magazines that come to my house. But if I'm going to be gone for 3 or 4 months, I have a little red thing this big that I've got all of it in. And so for me, I decide more on convenience, knowing that I prefer print. But I take notes the same way. And so one great tip that I got from my son, which is finally I got why I got this $50 trillion grandma phone, is so that I can take a picture of it. And if it's someplace, especially where I can't mark it up, I can take a picture of it and then I can go in with my little finger and mark it up with my colors. So, my advice is leverage the technology you're comfortable with. Because if I had to in the beginning get away from paper, I wouldn't be here. If I tell somebody my son's age, you've got to use paper, I'm going to lose that writer. And so I think where you're comfortable, you say, well, here's a snafu. I've got this book and I can't mark it up. Either find a free version, and this leads to my second point, what I put in about Derrida's article. If you type in Archive Fever Jacques Derrida full text, you can on Google pull up a free copy. And in the library in particular, and our fabulous librarians, I don't know what we did to get them, they can almost always help you find a free full text version. So if you're someplace and you have a print source and you say, this isn't working for my database, go to the librarians, honey. They'll show up and give you an appointment and get to know you like I did, and they will help you translate that technology. But again, just adding the 2 words full text can often help you find a digital copy where you can mark up and go crazy. I came from Appalachia, and the idea that you wrote in a book, I don't know if I'd have lived at home if I had done that. And so the idea of marking on digital copies in the late 80s and early 90s was just, I was appalled. And so I think the idea that you mark up digital text is an easier shift, right? Because you aren't ruining the book. But my advice is highlight away. You're the scholar. They make more books. They make more whatever. So I hope I answered that question. I'm at the
Thanks.
currently beginning of my college course. I love the plan not only for right. Oh, I'm so glad. Yes. So we have with is it Katerina? We
Yes.
have someone who has really got an excellent example. I wish I could have started when we were all in first grade, right? But what a perfect example of I'm going into this saying, this is my database of my own archive fever, and I'm going to pick colors. And imagine, too, Katerina, I suggest this from a faculty perspective. Imagine the beauty of being able to say to your dissertation committee, so here are my 4 colors. Wouldn't that be helpful for them?
That would be amazing if she decides to keep going. um,
Yes. So how are my journals and notebooks used? So I like to put that's a great question from D. Ellis. That's a great question. So for me, I'll pick 4 or 5 really anchor things and write them out in my own hand in my journals. And then I'll organize and write because I'm old school. And so the journal is kind of like you'll say this one on the front says at 55, and I've been in this one a little bit longer than maybe I should have because it's not really true anymore. But I'll have things that are really personal to me and that really matter. And I think this is going to be something I want to write for so and so. And I have that journal. Then I have another journal where it's curriculum based and I'm going to be taking notes for stuff I do at National. So it goes in there. Again, mine's very sophisticated, but when it's something where I'm like, oh, I can't get this thing out of me, it's going to go in a journal. And there is a different process. And I know we're short on time, but linguists tell us that when you write by hand, it is a different encoding than when you
mhm.
type with your fingers or with your thumbs. And I've really tried to stay current, although it may not seem like it to some of the more hip folks on here. But I really work to learn to type in my thumbs because my students are typing with their thumbs and it's encoded differently. So my advice, particularly with this, the most fluent people, yes, handwriting is dying. I could not agree more, and we can help stop that. Um, I could not, this idea that we only do it one way is just not cool, and it's the way societies and cultures fall. And if you don't believe me, you can just, go watch Rome on HBO or go watch Troy with whatever bad version you want to watch of that. But that's really what happens. And Greece, Troy, and Rome show you that when you don't use all the tools at your disposal, think what happened when we went from having an oral tradition to writing everything down. Well, we can't remember. Remember what? None of y'all maybe are old enough. Remember what the calculator did? What's 7 times 7? If you didn't have a good elementary school teacher, you don't know anymore. So this is what happens. And in my opinion, at the top of the food chain where y'all are on learning knowledge in a field, you should do everything you can to get it in your brain and to stretch those buckets and to put the stuff you can access later. In other words, use the technology we've got. First, we get writing, then we get a printing press, then we get the internet. Now we're getting AI. Use those to your advantage for your personal meal plan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meredith. Let me just real quick make sure, are there any other additional slides that I should share
Yes,
just for the
clicky
record?
click, clicky
Okay.
click, because I want y'all to know. Okay, so this is imagining in the head, and this is kind of what we've talked about. But I do, as you start, and I think Katerina is a good model for us to imagine when writers take a customize, it's who you are in the field and what ideas and themes define you. So please let me stress this. No matter where you are, you go in. This is where I am now. I'm going to look at who I am at various points in my career that matter to me. But like I told you with me and my husband Jim, he didn't like Derrida. So now you know that about him just because I told you. You're writing to tell us all. So when you use Susie Smith's article, I know what I think about Susie Smith, and the way you talk about her is going to tell me where you are. Take control, take your power, use this to make a long term database with the awareness that when I talk about sources that others in the field know, I'm identifying myself that way. I'm going to make it easy for that reader and make sure I'm saying what I mean. If we can click on one more.
You got it.
Okay, these are things for you to imagine farther on down the road. Can you imagine the meal plan format, drafting, revising? Can you imagine becoming fluent in the tool? And then if you'll click on ahead, Emily,
You got it.
y'all know the teacher always makes too much content, but we see adopt, organize, select, and apply. I think we can see ways to do that whether we're reading, whether we're writing, whether we're revising, or whether we're building Katerina's from day one all the way to the end. And we'll click on to the next slide. This is key. And I want to point out these are just stuff I picked, and I'm taking us back where we started. So if you came to the session on the 8th, you learned about how it matters where you sit. It matters where your mind is. It matters. I think she did a really lovely job as a colleague of setting that up. We know we have the Academic Success Center. You can go in and make a synchronous, asynchronous appointment with the tutors. You can attend those sections. So you're in a family of peers here, all of us saying, be our colleague, join the knowledge pool. So you know now, and hopefully you trust us from that way. But I want to show you, these are just some that I've had luck with. You'll see there's an intro and examples on a couple of those links. The doctoral dissertation and the lit review meal plan, I think she's very good. I've never worked with her personally, even though this is a small field. But there's one I wanted to call out on you that says meal plan with Chat GPT. I don't know how y'all feel about it. I mean, I ain't scared of the devil, as they say up here in the mountains, but I sure would like to introduce myself and know when he's dropping by. And so I feel like that bottom one really gives you an example. Whatever you think of AI, it explicates and explains, do this step, then do this step. Here are pitfalls. And again, I've not worked with her personally either, but I like her ethos. And it's a fairly new link. And I wanted to call that out because she shows you how to use Chat GPT to build your meal plans. Am I a big fan of Chat GPT? Well, I'm a big fan of Dwight Yoakam. I don't become fans of technologies. Do you know what I mean? I become fans of art forms. But it's out there, and as an educator, I'm educating myself on how it can do, what it can do, and how it works. And I wanted to point that out and include it because it really gets as if you're a big Chat GPT person, or if you're a big AI person, or if you're going to be required to do that, why would you not explore it as you're creating and personalizing your own form? And then for the print sources, I gave you some examples, but this is I wanted to give you a diverse sampling of what the meal plans can look like. And then I think the last one's really important, when not to use the meal plan. The meal plan is the body. Intro, conclusion, all those kind of things, those are not. Those are your why I did this. And final point, don't revise the intro and the conclusion until all your meal plans are in place, because the intro and conclusions are nothing more than foreshadowing the new knowledge you're adding in the meal plan. All right, we'll pop over to the last one. Pro tip. Do not forget our Academic Success Center. The tutors are free of charge. The librarians, the writing tutors. You can go to our YouTube channel and watch all this. She's going to send you this link. And I would also encourage you that if there's anything you think that based on this meal plan or based on archiving that you would like to know more about, when Emily sends you that information, Emily, I hope this is all right. Please email her and say, you know, I wish Dr. M had done more of this or that or the other, and we'll see if we can't get that sorted, okay?
Absolutely. All right. Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody, for the trust and respect to bring us here. It's really an honor, and I can't tell you how much it meant for me to come off the bench and make the meal plan matter at National. Godspeed to all of you. I know y'all are going to do great with your new knowledge.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr. Meredith. We really appreciate you. Thank you for coming and sharing your expertise and giving us some strategies on how to develop our paragraphs using the meal plan. Thank you all very much for your attention today. And Dr. Meredith, until the next time, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Take
Thank
care.
you.